Welcome to a Community Partners interview, where we explore the organizations, opportunities, and resources that look to make change in our daily lives. I'm your host, Shane Odowd Rutherford, and you're listening to Voices for Ability Radio, all abilities, all the time. Today, I'm joined by Wendy Porch, who is the Executive Director for the Centre for Independent Living in Toronto, also known as Cilt. They have a vision of social and economic equity for people with disabilities as seen through the lens of independent living principles. They develop and implement services, programs, and activities that empower individuals rather than create dependencies. They recognize that people with disabilities have the right to take control of their own lives. Through increased knowledge and examination of options, making informed choices, and taking calculated risks. They also offer skills training programs to people with disabilities to successfully integrate into the community. Thank you for joining us today, Wendy.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Tell us a bit more about you and what inspired you to work at Cilt. Why work with individuals with disabilities?
Well, I have a disability myself, so I am a disabled person too. I was born with missing part of my left hand and part of my right arm. And so, when you're born as a person with a disability, you're kind of an advocate before you even really know what the word advocacy means. So growing up with my own disability, I found often that there were situations that I was in where I thought, this doesn't seem quite right that, things went down this way. And I had to kind of stand up for myself frequently. So, with that sort of background in mind, when I graduated from university at the University of Guelph, and I moved to Toronto, the big city, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And luckily, there was a job opening at Arch, which is a legal aid clinic that specifically supports disabled people across Ontario. And that was my first job. And so from that point forward, I had kind of a window into the lives of disabled people across Ontario and the kinds of barriers that not just me, not just the ones that I was facing, but the barriers that our community was facing from across the board. And so that really moved me to work with the values of disability justice, of independent living, and of disability rights.
And for those that are not familiar, Arch is a legal organization, and they are advocates in the court systems for people with disabilities. So that really aligns with your understanding of self-advocacy and then advocacy for others as well.
Yes, it really did. I saw, as I said, my first job was, maybe I didn't explain it very well. My first job was actually answering the phones at Arch. So when somebody would call into Arch, I was the first person that they explained what their challenge or issue or barrier was to, and then I would sort of triage the calls based on what they were looking for. And, some days I had 5 lines coming into Arch, and on some days, all 5 lines were ringing constantly with disabled people from across the province who were being evicted without any notice, who were unable to eat on a regular basis because they were trying to exist on the disability support payments. They were being disenfranchised in terms of their work because they weren't being accommodated. So the whole range of issues was sort of on display for me. It was kind of like jumping into the deep end, honestly, in terms of what happens for disabled people in Ontario. But I couldn't do that work and not feel deeply about trying to make change.
What keeps you committed when your work gets challenging like this?
Oh, it's such a great question. And it's one, that I have to return to time to time because the work is still very hard work to do. I think what keeps me committed are this is not a simple question, are the values of equality and inclusion for me. I think I strongly feel when people are being excluded from conversations, from service, from, as a disabled person, I think we often know when you're in a conversation with somebody that won't even meet your eyes or, stares at you in a way that is awkward.
That gaze that you get.
Yeah, you get that too, Shane.
I
So
do.
what happens for you then?
Well, people will look, and sometimes they're panicked. They don't know what to do. Or
Hmm.
sometimes it could be hypercritical, where they uh, are not prepared to engage. I
Hmm.
present in different ways. I have a visual impairment, and
Hmm.
my eyes, if I'm not wearing colored glasses, can be distracting. I'm also a burn survivor, so I have
Hmm.
very visible scarring, and so sometimes people are uncomfortable because they don't know how to approach or to communicate.
Hmm.
But also there are times where just ignored,
Yeah.
just completely not, they don't register that I'm there. And so that can be a problem as well.
Yes, I agree. And it's very similar for me. So my disability is something that you can see. And I have often felt either highly visible in public spaces where, you can really tell people are staring at you or commenting on you or pointing at you, or as you noted, completely invisible, where people want to talk around you and there's an awkwardness and, they want to talk to your partner or to your kid instead of you.
Anyone but you. I find
Yeah.
this oftentimes in medical settings where there's a
Yes.
conversation about me, and oftentimes I have to say, I'm right here.
Yeah.
Can I say something, please?
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting that you say that too about medical situations. With my disability growing up in Ontario, um, I was expected to go with my parents once a year to a hospital up here in Toronto for a check-in visit where I would meet with physiotherapists and then they would do something in the afternoon called clinic. Now, the hospital is now Holland Bloorview, but at the time when I was growing up, it was called the Ontario Crippled Children's Center. And this was what was on the letterhead. And, one day I had to ask my dad, Dad, what does crippled mean? And have that conversation. So, yeah, it was awkward. And then also, clinic in the afternoons was essentially, and there's a bunch of us from this generation too, not just me, but a lot of people from this generation. We would go to clinic, and clinic was essentially you sitting as a child in front of your x-rays, in front of a group of medical folks who sometimes seemed to be sketching me, and people would talk about your disability as though you weren't really in the room.
They'll talk about the injury or the actual disability, not realizing it's attached to you.
Exactly. And not realizing that you're listening, that you're
I'm
there.
here.
Yeah, exactly.
um, when I was doing my research on your website, I see that you offer several programs. Can you tell us more about the programs at Cilt and whom they're designed to support?
Oh, sure. So we have a number of programs at Cilt. Probably the biggest program that we offer is the direct funding self-managed attendance services program. This program turned 30 last year. It is an extraordinary program that was actually fought for by disabled people for about 10 years before it became a pilot program. What it is it's a self-managed model for people with physical disabilities who require attendance services. So folks with spinal cord injuries or muscular dystrophy or multiple sclerosis or um, disabilities like that. If somebody is quadriplegic or paraplegic, and they require help getting out of bed, um, eating, using the bathroom, getting dressed. Um, what normally would happen is those services would be provided by an agency. So the individual would be engaged with the agency. The agency would schedule when when that individual would come out to support the person with a disability. So they would send the person that they had usually. It's not necessarily a consistent one person. And the person with a disability doesn't have much say about who comes out to help them with activities which are quite intimate, actually.
They can
Uh,
be. So this could be bathing and changing and a
yes,
host of other very personal services. These are mostly attendant and PSW services.
exactly. So That's how service provision would normally function, is that the disabled person would receive a PSW or an attendant from an agency. And as we're saying, it could be somebody different every day. And there's no way normally for a disabled person to say, I would prefer this person to come out and help me with those activities. So
you're at the mercy of their offerings and their schedules as well. In my own experience, I was told, okay, we'll have somebody there Tuesday at 3. And I'm like, I have a doctor's appointment at 3. And like, that's the only time we have.
Yeah, that is one of the concerns.
No control.
Sorry, Shane.
Yeah, there isn't always the control that we need.
Exactly. So the power dynamic is quite something to contend with too, because the PSW or attendant in that model works for the agency. They don't work for the disabled person. So there can be challenges around, somebody, if a disabled consumer doesn't like how something is being done, but the agency is mandating that it's done that way, there are real difficulties there to managing that. So the direct funding program grew out of a group of disabled people who said, we don't need medical intervention. We have lived in our bodies for as long as we have. We know the best way for things to work for us, and we want to be in charge of the service. And so there was a pilot project where a number of folks were actually given the opportunity to be funded directly. They had to, and still have to be on the direct funding program, have the capacity to act as an employer. So we have a qualification process where folks need to be able to show us that they can hire and fire people, that they understand human rights legislation and employment legislation, employment deductions, etc. But if you qualify and your disability is stable and you understand your disability and what you need, and you qualify for the program, then money comes from the Ministry of Health via us to self-managers. That's what people on the program are called, to self-managers directly. And self-managers are the people who interview, hire, train, and maintain their own staff. So it is actually revolutionary in terms of the delivery of attendant service.
So the individual receives funding, and then they are able to hire and train their own attendants.
Exactly.
That means the entire locus of control remains with the individual.
Exactly. And this is why the program was fought for so furiously by early advocates in the community. So what we hear from people on the program, and there are between 900 and 1,000 people on the program at any one time in Ontario. And what we hear as being one of the primary things about the program that people love is it's less so about the control element and more so about choice, that people get to choose who it is that comes in and helps them with very intimate daily activities of living, and the relationships that are built between self-managers and the attendants that they hire. The vast majority of people in our program have been on it for decades. If you get on our program, you're likely to be on it for the rest of your life. And we hear continuously about the transformative nature of this program, that we had people who were literally living in hospital rooms who now can live in their own homes, who can open the window and feel the breeze in through their own windows. There are parents on the program, there are working professionals on the program, there are siblings on the program. It is a life-changing program for people who need attendant service and have the interest and the capacity to self-manage.
Excellent. And so with this, you said there's about 900 to 1,000. So this is provincially funded. Is there a cap on the number of people that can be in this program province-wise, or is it regionally specific?
It depends on the funding, and we are actually right now looking for more people to be on the program. So if any of your listeners are interested, please look for the Direct Funding Ontario website for details of how to start the process. The ultimate cap, the number varies quite a bit, because as you can imagine, sometimes people are hiring within their full budget. Sometimes they're not using their full budget. Sometimes folks are in hospital. Sometimes there are interruptions to service. So the number varies quite a bit. And we do have people, because we have people on the program for life, the most common way people exit the program is that they actually eventually pass away. So there's a constant influx of people onto the program and people off the program. So the number itself is not a static number, but we want to have as many people as possible on this program across Ontario. So as I said, if folks are interested, please do Google Direct Funding Ontario or get in touch with us at Cilt for more information.
So it's province-wide, and there are local chapters that people can access in order to be resourced and to learn about the program and how to engage with it.
Yes, we work with independent living resource centers from across Ontario in administering this program. So Toronto, my organization, Cilt, is the administrators for the program provincially. We also support self-managers in the Toronto area, but we have independent living resource centers across all of Ontario that would be local for folks who are in the London area, for example, or in Waterloo, or in Niagara, or up north as well. So information about your local center is available as well on our website.
And it also seems that this is fairly flexible. For example, somebody may need assistance in the morning, and so that they can go to work, or some people may even require assistance overnight. So there's a flexibility between the individual who is engaging with a support person for flexibilities in schedules.
Yes. So one of the initial startup phases of the program is you actually work with us to develop a budget and a schedule, and then that schedule gets implemented. So there are people that require some support with overnights. There are people, because you are basically setting your own schedule. What your needs are central to the development of that schedule.
Now, some people may hesitate because of financial management. I understand that there are sometimes services they can engage with to help them do that.
We have bookkeepers that assist pretty much all of the self-managers on the program. So the bookkeepers are an important resource. We actually provide funding to engage bookkeepers for self-managers on the program as well. And a number of them are very knowledgeable about the program. So in fact, when somebody joins the program, one of the things that we give them is a list of bookkeepers who are knowledgeable about working with self-managers.
So there's wraparound supports for people that are interested, bit of training and bookkeeping and support so people can fully engage.
Exactly. Yeah, we think it's very important to provide those supports, because the thing is, this is a big leap of faith for many people to go from a service that you do not manage, but that is, predictable and reliable, and that you don't have overall responsibility for, to being a self-manager is it can be a little bit daunting, to be honest. But we have plenty of supports to support self-managers in making that transition, and genuinely 100% people, when they do finally get started on the program and they start hiring, they say to us, why didn't I do this sooner? This is very manageable, and I am reaping the benefits of being a self-manager immediately. So,
excellent. Are there some common myths or misconceptions people have about independent living?
Yeah, I think there are. In general, independent living is often confused with community living. I think just within the sector, we hear that happen quite a bit. So somebody will say, oh, yes, I have a lot of expertise in independent living. But in fact, primarily the people that they've worked with are people with developmental disabilities, and they've worked with programs like the Passport program. So there are some similarities, but there are some differences too. I think the bulk of our programs are intended to support people who are living with physical disabilities. I think also, in terms of misconceptions around independent living, there's also somehow this overlap around retirement homes. I often see people saying, oh, so independent living for older adults. And, we have to kind of distinguish what independent living is. But
yeah, the overlap I can see where the confusion is. And then there's also supported living, which is generally for seniors that are quite competent and capable, but may require additional supports. But that's within a facility your programming is for people in their own home.
Yes, it is. So, and I really haven't spoken much to our other programs, but direct funding definitely supports people to live in their own homes. We also are the conveners of the Attendance Service Application Center for the Greater Toronto area. And that program, we are a centralized application point for folks with physical disabilities who may not be interested in direct funding. They would like to have support provided to them, but they are also potentially interested in an accessible unit. So they would like to live in supportive housing and receive attendance services. So before ASAC, which is the short form for our program, before ASAC, it was actually incumbent upon the consumer to apply to every one of the housing programs individually. So you would have to apply to the March of Dimes and then apply separately to Access Independent Living and apply separately to perhaps PACE or Bellwoods. We came together as a group and said, this is not the best use of consumers' resources. Could we do this together? So we do not provide any of those services, but we are the coordinating body for the wait list. And we work with supportive housing providers. When they declare a vacancy, we have a list of folks who have declared interest in their program that we provide to them. And then it's up to the supportive housing folks to get in touch and to fill those vacancies.
And is this is specific supported housing, or is it also independent living that is supported?
This is supportive housing within an independent living framework. So all of the programs that we work with are independent living oriented attendance service providers. And so the values of independent living are expected to be evident throughout service provision in these programs as well.
Okay, so that's a great resource, and there's other resources that are available. Would you like to expand on that?
Sure. We also have a range of programs at Cilt that we call our core programs. These are called that because it can be confusing to folks that are not actually working at an independent living center. But there are a set of programs that are considered to be core to the functions of independent living centers that directly support our mandates for social and economic equity for disabled people. So pretty much any independent living center across Canada that's accredited by Independent Living Canada, which is our umbrella organization, would provide the same kinds of core programs. So at Cilt, they are all primarily peer-based programs. So we have peer support programs. We have a service navigation program. We're working right now on revamping our volunteer program. We have an independent living skills facilitator who is an individual that works with disabled people who are potentially experiencing challenges with their service provision. John Massa is our independent living skills facilitator, has been with us for 25 years and is a person with lived experience as well, who can talk people through the ways to manage any of those kinds of challenges. We also have a parenting with a disability network at Cilt, which is one of the only places, frankly, in Ontario that has a focus not on children with disabilities, but on parents with disabilities. So we receive questions from across Canada. This is how limited resources are in parenting with a disability. And we provide supports and we work with service providers to understand and broaden our knowledge of what parenting with a disability looks like and what kinds of considerations should be built into training for people who are working with parents generally. And then finally, we also have a GTA Disability Coalition. So part of our mandate is around systems change. And within the Greater Toronto area, we have convened a group of 12 organizations who come together to specifically target issues at a municipal level related to accessible transit, to poverty reduction, and to accessible housing.
And these are people with disabilities and allies working together.
It is, exactly. And in fact, a great example of some of the work that we do happened just earlier this week. So the budget consultations are underway in the city of Toronto. They were underway. The public consultations Monday and Tuesday. And as a coalition, we had, I want to say, about 8 individual organizations and people with disabilities who went to various public budget consultations to raise awareness of the kinds of challenges that people with disabilities have in thriving in Toronto, and to ask for specific considerations in the context of the budget.
It's really important to keep that in front of the budget review adjudicators at every municipality, because a small oversight can be significant for members of the community and the community as a whole.
Yes, it really can be. And, just to add to this, part of what we see as being our job at Cilt is also to, and as an independent living center, is to support disabled people to make choices for themselves, to support them in having their voices heard. And we actually had last week a budget town hall that we co-hosted with Social Planning Toronto and TTC Riders for disabled people, by disabled people, to talk about the challenges that we all have in actually seeing ourselves represented at all in the budget. So there was some specific talk about, the kinds of supports that disabled people would like to see in the budget, what's actually in the budget currently, and conversation about how to support people to come out and provide deputations themselves, so that there is a broader narrative about the needs of disabled people that counselors are becoming increasingly aware of.
Excellent. So this is what success looks like for people with disabilities. It's active engagement and self-empowerment, really.
It is. I believe that. That is certainly what our values of independent living say. And I personally believe that very much. I think, as disabled people, the people in our lives know who we are and what we're capable of. But the kind of overriding stories about disabled people out in the world, you're either a Paralympian or you really cannot do anything for yourself at all. They tend to really override, the capacity of the community to make decisions for ourselves, So I think it's really important work that we do here.
Well, in a way, I guess this really helps people take their own power as their own, especially with direct funding, being able to control whom you're working with, whom you're engaging with, managing your own schedule, and having that control. I think that's hugely important on many different levels. I'm looking here, and are there any upcoming events or initiatives that people should know about?
There are likely a number of upcoming events. So we have regular Peer Connect meetings for folks who are interested in just being in a space facilitated by people with lived experience. So Peer Connect happens quite frequently. We have a series of workshops coming up around building emotional toolkits for parents with disabilities. It's a 3-part workshop series that we've partnered with Family Services Toronto and Vibrant Community Healthcare on developing. So how do we support ourselves as parents with disabilities? This is not an easy question. And I'm a parent myself with a disability, so this is an area of our programming that I'm always extremely interested in. As a parent with a disability, there are very often throughout your parenting journey moments where the system is almost designed to disempower you, where you're sort of invisible because nobody's ever seen a parent with a disability before. And so that workshop series is happening in February. So if folks are interested in that, they should reach out to us or have a look at our website to enroll. We also have a regular peer support group for parents with disabilities separate from that workshop. And again, what we hear from people who participate in our peer support group for parents with disabilities is it's so nice to be in a room with other parents with disabilities where you don't have to either be, pretending to not be disabled or, being watchful for kind of judgments around having a disability and having the gall, frankly, I'm being sarcastic, to be a parent, So there's a real kind of connection that happens in those groups too. In terms of other events, we regularly hold events across the year. One of the big events for us is usually around Independent Living Across Canada Day, which is in June. We also regularly have an event and did have an event last year on the UN Day of Disabled Persons to talk about the theme and to talk about how we could move forward. We frequently also do events for Black History Month as well.
And this year was the celebration of your 40th anniversary.
Yes, in 2025, we had a huge celebration for our 40th anniversary, 40 years of Cilt working with community. Most of us at Cilt have disabilities. So as I said, by people with disabilities, for people with disabilities. But we had a great celebration at Hart House at the University of Toronto with about 130 people, I think, came to sort of acknowledge and see each other. And it was wonderful because so many of us have been isolated post-pandemic as well. So,
and this really is the one thing everyone needs to know about Cilt and independent living. It is by people with disabilities for people with disabilities.
Yes, that is a key component of who we are and how we work. So, I've worked in other disability organizations, and I've been around for a while, and our organization is different from many in that we are structurally by and for communities. So our board of directors, our chair and vice chair have to be disabled people, and the majority of people on our board also have to be disabled people. And this means that we are guided by community. We don't take that terminology lightly. Nothing about us without us is really core to the work that we do. And you'll see that if you become engaged in any of the work that we do.
If listeners are looking for more information or want to reach out, how can they contact Cilt?
I think starting with the Center for Independent Living in Toronto's website would be a good place. So that is cilt.ca. We have a contact us email address on there, which is cilt@cilt.ca. There's our phone number there. There's plenty of information about all of our programs as well, and people that you can reach out to directly if you're looking to get engaged. And we are always looking for people to join us. We see that there are some gaps around independent living being well understood by young people, for example, and critically their parents. When a young person with a physical disability's parents don't know that there's a way for their kiddo to live out in the community and have an independent life, that is very limiting for possibilities. So we're always interested in outreach to everybody, but particularly young people, that we can encourage by showing them, look, this is what it looks like. This is how you can live your own independent life. You can have a job if you can. You can have partners if you're interested. You can have interests. You can do things for yourself. You can have your voice heard. So outreach to everybody. Please contact us if you're interested in any of our programs. And in particular, if you're a young person and you're wondering about that for yourself, I encourage you to get in touch.
Wendy, thank you so much for joining us and for the work Cilt does every day to support independent living and equity, and very importantly, advocacy for people with disabilities. You've been listening. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, Shane, it's been a real pleasure speaking to you, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thanks so much. You've been listening to Voices for Ability Radio, all ability, all the time. I'm your host, Shane Odowd Rutherford. We'll see you next time.